So, before I go and bolt all the compressor, the alternator, the standoff and everything, thought I would deal with this. Now, so this is the newer style Serpentine front, which also has an oil pump that's not driven off the distributor that's missing right now. And so it has a completely different casting for this front, and one of the differences between this and the original engine is there's only one port for oil pressure. So on a standard 3.5 liter Rover V8, there are two ports. So there's one for an idiot light, which is what this is. There's also one for the pressure gauge. So I'm going to make an adapter so I can run both sending units. And I thought I would do that before I filled all this space up, and then I'd have a hard time putting it all together. So today's going to be a bit of lathe time, which is always fun. I'm going to start with some 1-inch brass hex stock, and I'm going to machine off a piece here so we can thread the end to fit into the block. And we're lucky in that the block is threaded 1/2 inch fine, 20 threads to the inch, so it's a standard size, and I've got a die for that, so that'll make life a lot easier. So I think we're going to go with probably just a medium speed. Run the bit in so it touches, and there it is. So I'm going to machine off about 1/2 inch. Love turning brass, it works so nice. Pity it's so expensive. The expensive sleeping's on the floor. So you can see we've gotten past the hex section now. We're doing just straight cutting. And this is it's a carbide bit. This is actually an old Logan lathe. I think it was built in 1943. And it's I think it's 11 by 36. So I got it a few years ago. And I tell you, it's kind of like a welder. You kind of wonder what you did without one once you get one. So, machine this down to 1/2 inch. Put a little taper at the end just to make life easier all along. And I'm going to use this 1/2 inch threading die to cut threads. So if you're wondering why I can do all that without the head spinning, it's because I've engaged the gear reduction, but I have not disengaged the shaft lock, and that just effectively locks the head. It's handy when you're trying to thread things and all that. And there's actually supposed to be a tang on this to hold it in the out position, but it's a 1943 lathe and the tang's broke. So I improvised. Threading it on doesn't matter, but when you come back, this thing wants to slide back in. So just a Harbor Freight clip cured all that. So there's to thread it in. I'm going to take a fine cut, and I'm going to just make sure that this is a nice smooth surface. And I'll probably turn this down a little bit just to make sure it doesn't hit anything. It is bigger around than the sending unit was, so I want to make sure when I wind this into the block I don't want it into any of the bosses or anything. So take it back out now, measure it up, figure out how long I want it, and then we're going to have to bore it and thread the other end. Now we just need to cut this off, and then we'll have to flip it around and drill and tap the other end. Okay, so we're set up with the hole starter just to get a centered hole, and then we're going to have to drill it 29/64 to fix up the 1/2 inch bit. There we go. So I'm going to run a smaller bit through first because 29/64 is pretty big, and this thing's going to need a through hole anyway. So I'll probably drill through with 1/4 inch all the way through, and then step up to the 29/64 and just do. Well, obviously won't have to drill all the way through. I'll drill down about 1/2 or 3/4 of an inch, just enough to catch the sending in. Okay, so the 1/4 inch hole's through. 29/64 drill bit. I set this at 1 inch because I want to go in 3/4. So this is my reference that the I'm going to pull this back. The Morse taper releases it somewhere around 3/8 of an inch. So it's just easier to wind it out to 1 inch and not do math. So let's see if we can't put a 3/4 inch hole in this thing. Oh well. The Morse taper was loose. Tightened itself up. Nearly 1/2 inch. There's 3/4. Here we go, just a smidgen extra to allow for the taper on the end of the drill bit. And that should be it. We just need to tap that now. There we go. That's out of the way. Shut that down. Okay, so it's almost done. As you can see, I just tried it in place, see how it will fit. This boss doesn't seem to be used for anything, so I'm not worried about that. So the only thing left is I need to put the gaskets in, because eventually I need to drill a hole in one of these flats and tap it for an 1/8 inch plug, pipe thread, because that's where the other sensor goes. But I don't know which flat because I don't have the gasket, so I don't know where it's going to stop. But that I'll just do with a drill press and a hand tap, and that'll be easy enough. Okay, so got the bracket in, the original mount, the compressor's in. You can kind of see underneath. Get that oil. The new brass multi-port oil part that we made is in. So now I just need to bolt the alternator in and then see if the hood fits. Okay, so the alternator's in, the bonnet's latched, the alternator's right there. I don't know how well you can see that, but got 3/8 or so clearance, just barely, and that's because I put it in this. Well, let me open the hood enough. So this is the area under where the alternator sits, and as you can see, if I had another hand, there's extra sound deadening material on the inside of the bonnet here. So you can see this kind of little mark here. That's where me pushing on the hood has put the dent in that sound deadening material. So when I put it back together the very first time, it was touching. So I adjusted these end stops up a little bit, which means I had to adjust the center spring. Maybe about a 1/4 inch right here, and the top of the alternator I shaved just a little bit off of the fins. You can see they're kind of shiny. So, and that's where I picked up my bit of clearance, and also the fact that this motor mount on this, because the motor is just sitting in the car, it's not bolted down. That motor mount is still a 1/2 inch up, so the motor is going to drop down just a hair more. So if I was going to do it again, I'd go for another 1/4 inch off the top of the other bracket, which means you start to cut into those webs a little bit, but I think that'd be okay. That 1/8 of an inch here and 1/8 of an inch there make a big difference. You can also see, if I had enough hands, this belt is too long now. It's about 2.5 inches too long. And one of the other things that I wasn't really thinking about, if you look right there, those two belts touch. So, and that's because the alternator got moved away from the center line of the engine just a little bit to give me clearance in here. if I had a belt that was the correct size on, that idler pulley, tensioner pulley, goes down arc to put tension in. So if I had the right one in, it'd just clear. But what I think I'm going to do is, that thing is positioned, the back of the casting, that there's that arm, and then there's another piece of aluminum behind it. That's where the coil spring's at that puts the tension in. There's a finger and an alignment hole in the big casting, which you may have noticed when we were working on it. I think what I'm going to do, rather than taking this apart and everything else, because this pulley's got plenty of room underneath, I'm going to drill a secondary alignment hole, rotate that down about maybe 45 degrees, and that'll be plenty of clearance, and it'll be pretty easy to do. It's just a piece of aluminum. It's about a 1/2 inch hole. So I think I can do that. I mean, I might have to take the bracket back off, but that's not a big deal at this point. And then, of course, I'll need to get a shorter belt. This one's easily 2.5 to 3 inches too long. So what I'm going to do is reposition that tensioner pulley, and then I'll put the belt back on and see what I get for length there. I do have the part numbers from this belt, so I should be able to go in. Also, it says exactly how long this is. I have Napa ProLink, so that gives you all the information about the length of the pulleys. So if I put in, chances are that the part numbers are, very, very similar. So you put the first 3/4 of the part number in and an asterisk, and it'll bring up everything that, the asterisk acts like a wild card. It'll bring up everything that's, that kind of thing, and then I'll see what I can get for one that's going to work for length. So, like I say, it's just barely in, starting from scratch. There's a couple of things I do a little bit differently, but I think we got it for this one. I'll just have to drill that hole. And it's getting real hot out here, so I think that's going to be it for today.